When you're looking to buy one of the most emotionally driven designs in the industry, it's pretty hard to beat the entire package of an Aston Martin. This century-plus-year-old British car manufacturer has essentially been building one of the sexiest cars that money can buy, and because of the exclusivity and the sleekness, Aston Martin has always been a brand that's really reserved for the rich and famous. Now, of course, with any car manufacturer, there's always an entry-level model, and for Aston Martin, that vehicle has been the Vantage since about 2005 across the world. This current generation that you see here has technically been around since 2017, which means it's time for Aston to give the baby Aston its first significant refresh for 2025. And as you can see this week, we are testing out this absolutely stunning podium green Aston Martin Vantage. It got some big changes this year in the form of a completely new front fascia. Underneath the hood, the AMG sourced V8 has been reworked to deliver 30% more power than before. And on the inside, Aston Martin has given this vehicle a huge tech upgrade with a new infotainment screen that has been designed in-house. So now that we're finally getting a chance to spend a full week with the Aston Martin Vantage, the big question I went answered for those of you who are looking for a British sports car that'll essentially make your neighbor's Porsche 911 appear invisible, how does the latest version of the Aston Martin Vantage stack up? Stay tuned to find out. So before we start talking about the beautiful exterior styling of the revised 2025 Vantage, let me go ahead and pop the hood and show you guys what's powering this thing. Now, when this generation Vantage first came out, it essentially introduced the AMG M177 V8 under the hood. For 2025, the mad scientists, powertrain engineers at Aston have seriously pumped up this engine to give it 30% more power. Now, underneath the hood, you're going to find a front midship layout, and that's because the engine, as you can see, sits pretty far back behind the front axle line, and that helps to give this vehicle a perfect 50-50 weight distribution. As you can see, it's a longitudinally mounted engine, and the engine itself, while it is a hand-built vehicle in Great Britain, the final inspection is done by Luke Wensley, because remember, this engine is built by Mercedes-AMG. It's hand-assembled, of course, and then shipped over to Britain for them to do their final inspection. But this 4-liter twin turbocharged gasoline direct injection V8 known as the M177 now makes 656 horsepower. That's up 153 ponies versus the 2023 model, and torque is also 590 pound-feet. That's around 85 more pound-feet versus last year's model. I mean, that is a significant jump in power. Aston Martin says they've done that by redoing the internals, putting larger turbos on it, more boost, of course, better cooling. That is, again, a significant power. It's still a little bit less horsepower than what you're going to get in the DB12, which offers 671 horsepower, but it is more power versus AMG's own GT63S. Although not the SE Performance, because AMG also offers a plug-in hybrid variant of this powertrain, but obviously not here for Aston Martin. Now, the difference, again, with this vehicle compared to AMG models is this car comes with an 8-speed torque converter automatic built by ZF as opposed to the 9-speed MCT that Mercedes-AMG uses. Sadly, Aston Martin only offers this vehicle with rear-wheel drive with a limited slip mechanical rear differential to help put the power down. This vehicle could be significantly faster with all-wheel drive. Fuel economy is rated at 15 in the city, 22 on the highway. With its 20-gallon fuel tank, you're theoretically looking at around 300-ish miles of range on a full tank if you're able to keep your right foot under control. Now, Aston Martin claims 0 to 60 times have gone down to 3.4 seconds, of course. It now has a top speed of 202 miles an hour, so it now breaks the 200-mile-per-hour barrier thanks to the significant increase in power. This thing would be a lot faster, again, if it had all-wheel drive, but because it is rear-wheel drive, the curb weight is basically the same at just under 3,800 pounds. Not the lightest vehicle, but again, it is significantly lighter versus its hybridized all-wheel drive competitors, which are arguably technically faster. But let's go ahead and close up this hood here and talk about the exterior styling. Now, first of all, Aston Martin is known for building some absolutely sexy, gorgeous vehicles. And when the Vantage first came out back in 2019, the new version, I actually wasn't really the biggest fan of the design. I mean, yes, it was a beautiful car, but I think that the big changes that Aston has done to it for 2025 have only made this car look even sexier. You can see the hood is extremely long. It's an aluminum bonded chassis. Those vents, those heat extractor vents are functional, of course. The front end basically borrows a lot from the DB12 for this vehicle. It almost looks like a DB12. It's almost hard to tell the two apart Remember, the Vantage is kind of their entry point. It's a little bit smaller and a lot less expensive versus the DB12. You can see all Vantages come with the company's full LED headlights with an LED projector for the low and high beams, LED daytime running lights, LED turn signals, of course. You can see that beautiful Aston logo is front and center there that kind of flows perfectly into the creases for the bonnet. That's what the British like to call the hood. In America, we call it a hood. You can see it's got the classic Aston grille. My particular test car has like a veined black finish grille for an extra $800. Again, functional openings. You have a front camera system, integrated parking sensors, and then down there is the little radar sensor for the driver assistance tech. And then my test car also has like a black package for the lower front, for the lower part and the upper part for an extra $7,000. You can see that front splitter is kind of gloss black. There are some functional vents again over there to kind of help manage the airflow. And this vehicle in general just has that classic sports car proportion. In fact, it almost looks like a supercar now because of how low and wide it is. Aston says they've modified the aluminum bonded chassis for this vehicle, so it's now 5% stiffer. They've also retuned the suspension for this car. It's got an overall length of around 177 inches long, so it's around a half an inch longer than the pre-refresh model with a 106.5-inch wheelbase. Compared to the old Vantage that was that replaced this vehicle, or that was the predecessor, that came out back in 2006, Aston actually made this car roughly 4 inches longer. It's also 3.5 inches wider versus the 2023 model at just over 80.5 inches wide. So again, it's a really wide vehicle. This is about the same size as a Porsche 911, although technically the 911 is a little bit longer by 1.5 inches. But as you can see, my test car has these satin black Y-finish forged wheels for an extra $6,000. Plus, it also has a $14,000 option for the carbon ceramic brakes. Those yellow painted calipers are an extra $2,000. Those brake rotors, as you can see, they're cross-drilled. They're 16.1 inches in diameter, about 15 inches in diameter in the rear. Remember, it doesn't have an adaptive suspension or an air suspension, just fixed sports suspension, which has been adjusted. You can see this color, podium green, is an extra $10,000, and I think it's worth every penny. I love the color here with the yellow brake calipers. It just makes an already sexy vehicle stand out in even more ways. You can see there are some functional vents over here, along with a subtle Aston Martin badge. The mirrors, as you can see, they actually protrude pretty far out. Like, they fold in, but this always sticks out. So again, it kind of increases the width. I love the black, gloss black finish there with the integrated turn signals, the integrated cameras as well. My test car could have used like a black painted roof or a carbon fiber roof. I believe that's an optional extra. No sunroof, I don't think, is available on this vehicle. I also like the kind of black along the sill over here. It kind of brings the heaviness of the car upwards, so it doesn't look quite as fat from the bottom portion. You can see the tires are 325 by 30 ZR21, so the tires in the rear are even fatter versus the 275s up front. These are a Michelin Pilot Sport S5 tires, so it's a summer performance tire. Again, we're going to be driving it in kind of winter conditions where it's just over 45 degrees out here, but just look at it, guys. From this angle here, this is seriously a beautiful car. I mean, the car itself, the rear, doesn't really look all that different from the pre-refresh model. It's mostly in the front, but I just think Aston did such a fantastic job. I mean, this look, I've seen it before on the DBX 707, their SUV, but it just looks so much better on a sports car like this. You can see it has that classic sportback design here, with a really nicely sized rear window so you can see out of it nicely. I love the rear taillights. You can see it's got the full-length light bar, although technically this middle portion here, it looks like it doesn't illuminate, or it could be part of the brake lights. You can see turn signals are full LED, brake lights are full LED. The reverse lights, I believe they're located in the rear bumper down there. You can see it's got a beautiful quad outlet exhaust system for this car, and Aston Martin has tuned the exhaust to be unique. So let's go ahead and fire it up. You guys can hear how that AMG V8 sounds in an Aston. And even though this is a German V8, I'm shockingly impressed with how different this motor sounds, which we'll talk about later on during the driving scene. It just has those British muscle car noises, and I love the crackles and the pops. This rear diffuser, you can see, is also very aggressive. You can also see the car is incredibly low with these really fat tires. Sadly, the vehicle doesn't have an axle front lift system, so you do have to be careful when you're driving this vehicle up and down driveways, but let me go ahead and open up the trunk, because to open up the trunk, you have to push this button here. I couldn't find a release back here to open up the trunk, but even though this vehicle is a two-seater sports car, when you open up the lift gate, it actually surprisingly has a good amount of practicality. In fact, Aston says you have just over 8.5 cubic feet of storage space back here. 8.5 definitely isn't a lot if you're coming from like an SUV or a sedan, but for a sports car, it actually has a good amount of space. You can see pretty decent size cargo area. This is technically the cover that the car comes with, along with a battery charger, because remember, most people tend to not daily drive these. You can see there's also another little area here, like a shelf where you can store some things. It's technically, again, a hatchback, but there's no back seats. There is kind of like a cargo cover here that's built in. It's nicely carpeted. But again, for those of you who need to use this vehicle to carry a weekend's worth of luggage, you'll be pleasantly surprised with how much this new Vantage can hold in the trunk. So once you've gotten past the beautiful exterior styling of the new Aston Martin Vantage, let's go ahead and hop into the interior. Before we get inside, however, let me show you guys the key fob. You can see this is a purely unique Aston key here. The key itself is a rather hefty key, but it feels high quality. It feels expensive. I love the kind of glass that you have here at the end of the key, where it shows the beautiful Aston logo, along with more Aston Martin badging here. You have your typical buttons here for lock, unlock, power open for the trunk, or pop open for the trunk, not power open. And then there should also be a panic function, which I'm having trouble locating on this fob, but again, it's a really nice fob. I don't believe Aston offers a phone as a key function, but as you can see right now, I've got the vehicle locked. That's what the mirror looks like when it's folded in. Again, this kind of sticks out and protrudes a pretty good amount. When you unlock the vehicle, if you push the unlock button, you can see those door handles that retract, and expose itself. That's an extra $600, which surprisingly, I think it should have been included as standard equipment. But again, it's an Aston Martin, so you're going to be paying extra for a lot of features. But as you open up the door, you can see the one thing about the door that I noticed is it's a traditional door in the way that it opens, but when you actually open it, it actually does go upward a smidge. Now it goes upward to kind of keep the door from hitting a curb if you guys have it parked at an end spot in a parking lot, for example. So again, I think that's a really clever, nice touch, although it doesn't have like those really crazy scissor doors that you're gonna find on like a Lamborghini, for example. But again, this interior is called Onyx Black Hair Cell. I personally would have gone with a brown, like a saddle tan or brown interior to go with this beautiful podium green. But this Onyx Black Hair Cell leather kind of has this beautiful contrast yellow stitching. I think it's called Accelerate, along with the beautiful Aston logo embossed on the head restraints. There's also some suede Alcantara here. These seats, I think they adjust in like 16 different ways. They are 3-level heated, but sadly not ventilated. I actually am a little surprised that at this price point it doesn't have ventilated seats. You can see Aston likes to put the seat controls there on the console, which is actually a really good spot for them because I was able to see them really easily. I can adjust the seats nicely. It has 3-person memory, as you guys saw. And then of course, being a hand-built British supercar, it has beautiful materials. You can see real leather over the upper portion with that Accelerate yellow contrast stitching. You have the carbon fiber, or I'm sorry, the Alcantara over here. My test car for an extra 10 grand has the optional Bowers & Wilkins stereo system. If you guys are an audiophile, highly recommend that, but the price is a little bit outrageous. But again, it's an Aston, so you kind of expect that. You can see the leather area here is nicely stitched. There's a little grab handle here, or a little storage area actually. Window controls, they feel pretty high quality. This is like a unique parts here, although it kind of reminds me a little bit of like a Volvo almost in the font and script. There's your mirror control over there, a little bit more storage over here. That opens up your trunk again. That's the only pop open feature or pop open button for the trunk that I've seen in the interior. You can also see there's a little placard here that reminds you this is hand built in Great Britain, along with some really nice plush carpeting. And overall, it certainly makes a nice first impression. Now getting inside, you can see this vehicle is really low, so it's kind of reminding me that I'm getting old, but it also has a pretty wide sill here, so you kind of have to make sure that you don't hit your knees against that. And you can also see the vehicle's kind of dirty down here. This side sill kind of gets in the way, so it's a little bit of an annoyance to get in and out of the vehicle, but once you're in, it definitely feels nice in here. And as I shut the door has a really solid sounding thunk, which adds to the impression of quality. Sadly, however, no soft close feature. For $250,000+ it should have a soft close feature, but again, I'm kind of griping and nitpicking a little bit here. Looking at the rest of this interior, you can see Aston made some pretty big upgrades that kind of mirror what we saw on the DB12 and also what I just saw on the Aston Martin DB X707. Starting the vehicle up, you can see the start-stop button is located here in the center with a beautiful glass cover over it. Put your foot on the brake. Place key in the marked spot. I'm not sure why it's not reading the key. It was earlier, but let's try this again. There we go. Hand-built British car, what do you expect? But once the vehicle starts up, you can hear it doesn't have a traditional start, or it has a traditional starter noise because this is not a hybrid or a mild hybrid. The engine started up in its sport mode, which is technically the normal mode. If you want to change the drive mode, you rotate the little start-stop knob, which I can go to Sport Plus, which turns red, and then I can go to Track, which is the most aggressive mode. That's essentially opening everything up. Ooh. Oh, that is a lovely sound. And again, it shocks me so much how Aston was able to change the sound and the character of this engine, even though, again, I've heard it so many times in some AMG products. Now, looking at the rest of this cabin, you can see it's a really nice place to spend time with high quality materials, beautiful, choices here for fit and finish and for colors and whatnot. My particular test car has a boatload of carbon fiber. So there's a carbon fiber here, carbon fiber along the door panels, carbon fiber along the center console. The carbon fiber is like an extra $7,000, depending on, how much more that you want. Like Aston basically charges you extra for the carbon fiber here and for the carbon fiber here. I kind of think they should have just charged you one time for carbon fiber and then threw it out through the rest of the interior. You can see there's real leather stitching on the upper portion here, more leather over here, carbon fiber along the instrument panel hood. You have a 10.25-inch full LCD cluster, which is slightly customizable. You can kind of change the way that looks by pushing that little button. This also has like a touch-sensitive little pad here where you can adjust this. You can also change the view. I can also kind of go to more of a minimalistic view there. You can also put it into a light or a dark theme. You can see once I change the view there, it takes a second for it to work, but once it pulls up, it certainly looks a lot more modern. But I also noticed the software is a little bit slow at times. So this is something that, again, kind of shows you that Aston is a much smaller brand. They don't necessarily have the resources of like a Porsche or a Ferrari or a Bentley, for example. The steering wheel has a power tilt and telescoping mechanism, good amount of adjustability, which is nice. You can see these paddles for the wheel are fixed onto the actual wheel. They are made of metal. I don't know why it's telling me the key's not in here. The key is right here. So never was giving me that problem earlier, but today it just decides to give me that little issue. I also noticed the little stalk here for the wipers that actually is pulled out of an older Mercedes product, as is the power steering stalk over there to adjust the tilt and telescope of the steering wheel. The steering wheel itself, I do love the way it looks and it feels. I love the leather with the nice cross stitching here. Lots of piano black on this wheel, however, which I don't love. It has a nice flat bottom design with a nice 9-3 grip. The horn, it sounds pretty much as I expected. It's nondescript, but it appropriately toned given, what this vehicle is. No heads-up display for this car, and then you can see the beautiful carbon fiber here looks nice. I like how the vents are also a traditional style. They also have a little twisty air here. We can open and close the vents. The carbon looks good with the aluminum trim, with the piano black, and then of course here in the center, this is the new Aston Martin developed infotainment system. So the electrical architecture of this car was completely redone. Previously, you had the old Mercedes command system, which was garbage. It didn't even have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It wasn't a touchscreen. This, however, is now a touchscreen. My phone is not connected because I'm using it to film, so it messes up the audio, so I can't do so. It does have factory embedded GPS, which, as you can see, it's fine. It's relatively quick and responsive. You can go into like actual gauges here, different telemetry gauges. You can go to your drive mode selector here. We can edit the personal custom drive modes. You can go to your driver assistance tech. You can go to lights. You can also change the ambient lighting in this car. Go into your vehicle settings here and then go into like your parking sources. This is your audio information. I don't like how there's no like confirmation beep whenever I'm going through and scrolling through different buttons here on the screen. Typically you can turn that on and off, but for some reason Aston Martin doesn't allow you to do that. At least I couldn't figure out how to do that. Swipe over this way. This is where you can access the climate functions here. You can see it has a dual zone automatic temperature control function. It has your 3-level heated seats over here, although no cooled seats. Again, that little beep is what I wanted it to do when I basically am trying to go through the different, sources and whatnot in the actual infotainment display. You have lots of knobs here. So I love how there's a temperature knob here, a fan speed control. There's your temperature for the passenger, volume knob. And then Aston did replace the old push buttons for the transmission selector. Now it's a toggle that kind of reminds me of a Porsche. Basically, there's a P button to go to park. You push it all the way up to go to reverse. That reveals your full 360 camera, which includes trajectory, distance markers, parking sensors, all the good stuff that you expect. The quality and the resolution of the screen is also pretty good. And the size of the screen is fine. It's nothing super crazy good, but if you guys are looking for better tech, Porsche will happily sell you, again, a 911. You do have your driver assistance stuff here, like your lane keep assist, parking sensors. There's your 360 camera button. You can also adjust the suspension and the exhaust noise and turn off the stability control along with the start-stop. There's your manual mode here if you want to control it via the paddles from that 8-speed automatic. And then, like I said earlier, seat controls are located here They're also on the same side over here for the passenger side. And then if you guys are looking for a wireless phone charging pad, it's actually located down here in this little area here. So it actually fit my iPhone 16 Pro Max quite nicely. Now, the console also has some beautiful leather with the same yellow stitch. You have a nice padded console area here. And then if you open this up, you can see it's not very deep. It's a really shallow console, but at least it offers some covered storage. You have 2 USB-C charging ports and a power outlet there. The seats, like I said, are covered in leather. Hair cell leather is what they called it, and then an Alcantara mixture. They are comfortable, supportive. They hold you in place very nicely. I just wish they were ventilated. I don't know why they're not ventilated or massaging. It should be, again, at this price point. I'm also surprised to see that there is a glove box, albeit a very small one. This is literally one of the smallest glove boxes I've ever seen, but at least it's here. It's nice that Aston at least includes a glove box. There is an auto-dimming frameless style rearview mirror, which looks good. No digital camera mirror, but you can see the view out of the back is actually pretty decent. The Alcantara that you see on the headliner is an extra $3,000. It also includes leather stitching and real metal, it looks like, for the actual, I guess, like hardware for the sun visor, which is definitely a nice upscale touch. It better be considering the price. Obviously no back seats, but you do have a nice little storage area back here, 2 storage compartments behind each of the seats. So relatively practical vehicle for a car that's also hand built. In my week's worth of testing, I didn't notice any squeaks and rattles. Build quality was fantastic. Material quality was fantastic. I just personally would have added or chosen like a brown saddle tan interior. I also would have liked to see this vehicle with cooled seats, massaging seats, or at least a heated steering wheel. I actually couldn't even find a heated steering wheel in this model, so that's something to keep in mind. But overall, it certainly has the luxury and the technology that you expect from a vehicle, you know, with the Aston Martin badge, but it also has a few quirks that might remind you that you might find better features or, you know, more, you know, notable features from something like a Porsche or a Bentley. So it's kind of crazy to think that I've been doing these video reviews for over 10 plus years, and this is my first time reviewing an Aston Martin Vantage for you guys. So again, getting this opportunity to drive a super sports car like this is super rare, and I'm just really grateful because this car, to me, has always been the epitome of, you know, what I consider to be one of the most beautiful looking sports cars of all time. I mean, yes, the Vantage nameplate has been around for decades. This has always been kind of known as the entry-level sports car for Aston Martin, although it's been more leaning toward as a GT car. But of course, Aston wanted to make it a lot more serious for the new generation that was first introduced back in 2019. This model that we're driving here, obviously the heavily revised version, gets extensive upgrades to the exterior design. It's over 3 inches wider, and we also have significantly more power underneath the hood, which is a very, very good thing. What's interesting about this vehicle is it's a British car that's hand built in England, obviously, but the engine comes from AMG. It's known as the M177, and Aston Martin's engineers, they've really kind of sunk their teeth into this motor to deliver an extra 153 horsepower. So 30% more power from this 4-liter V8, making 656 horsepower, up from, again, 503, which was a lot back then, but it certainly is a much more agreeable this time. Now, the downside about the Vantage is that you can still only get this vehicle with rear-wheel drive. Also, sadly, the manual transmission that was available in the AMR is also discontinued. Aston says, however, that they are not dropping manuals. They are not dropping the V12s that they're known for. And this transmission, or this engine, is hooked up to an 8-speed automatic transmission built by ZF. So it's technically a different transmission versus the 9-speed that Mercedes-AMG uses, which is their own transmission design, where it has like a speed shift function. This, again, is a conventional torque converter automatic. We don't have any kind of adaptive dampers, but Aston says they've made the chassis, the aluminum bonded chassis, 5% stiffer. The suspension got reworked. And it also has a limited slip differential, which we're going to be putting it through the test and using it on our driving route, because as you can see, it is kind of in the middle of winter, although the temps today are more mild. It's just under 50 degrees. We are on the Michelin Pilot Sport S5 tire, so it's a summer tire. So I'm going to have to be a little bit cautious with my acceleration for this vehicle. As you can see, the roads are dry, but there are also some damp spots. I've had a chance to put some heat in the tires a little bit by driving it around. And this vehicle is equipped with launch control. Aston Martin says it is capable of sprinting to 60 in 3.4 seconds. Now, of course, it's always traction limited. This is a rear-wheel drive vehicle, so you're going to be able to, you know, do that on certain road conditions and prep surfaces. But This vehicle in general, even though it's a sports car, feels really comfortable to drive. So I'm really surprised at how comfy it actually is. The ride quality is very agreeable. The car feels more like a sports car, but it also still feels like it's got hints of a GT car. And that's kind of what Astons are known for. It has that dual personality. But now that I found this one stretch of road that is dry, that is also agreeable, let's go ahead and see if we can get 0 to 60 wise. The vehicle is in its Sport Plus setting. It's got launch control, so you basically brake, torque it, and floor it. Wow, 3.75 seconds, 0 to 60. And as you guys saw, the back end is skipping around. It gets a little bit sideways, but it's not terribly, frightening. I was like really worried about it at first. I tried a few times where I was launching it and I was like, all right, let's see how this thing will actually do. It's actually not terrible, but obviously this vehicle's acceleration could be much better if it just had all-wheel drive or some stickier all-season or winter tires around these conditions. But what's interesting about this engine is I've driven this engine a fairly good amount in AMG models, but it sounds different in this car. Aston has done something to the exhaust to make it sound really good for one. But like, I just love the, it's got the cracks and the pops from the exhaust. Oh. Now for a torque converter automatic, this thing shifts pretty well. Now it's not as quick as the Porsche PDKs. If you guys are used to driving a 911, for example. I love the shrill that it makes above 6,000 RPM. This is just an engine that loves to scream all the way to 7,000 RPM. Oh. Oh my God, and that's the thing about Aston Martins is they are just known for being just kind of having that brutality from the exhaust, from the engine. It's just that British muscle car feel to it. And so I love how Aston's kind of baked that in to this vehicle. It just feels special. It feels very different versus the same motor that you're gonna find in a Mercedes product. I'm actually genuinely shocked at how different this car feels. Now the transmission is still a very smooth transmission. I'm actually really surprised at how it shifts very quickly, but it also is good at just driving around town, even in track mode. With the car in its stiffest, most aggressive settings, it feels pretty darn impressive how good this thing is. And then when you slow down, you can feel it downshifts, and then you put your foot down. There's plenty of power. There's no turbo lag in this engine whatsoever, even though they've gone to bigger turbos, more boost, they've redone the internals. It feels very linear in its power band, but also it just has like a fire that makes this thing special feeling. It doesn't feel like the same AMG V8 that I know so well, which is really shocking to me how Aston engineers were kind of able to do that. I wasn't expecting that level of change. But let's try another run here real quick. Again, there's where it's like slipping a little bit, 4.1 there, but we'll take the 3.75 just because I don't want to end up with this thing sideways or in a ditch. But for the most part, the stability control clamps in. It's still really agreeable. It's not horribly scary, but I just imagine this thing could be like a 3-second car, a sub 3-second car if it had all-wheel drive grip, or if I had it on, better weather conditions where it was like hotter outside. But overall, I put the drive mode back into sport. This thing still feels super comfortable. First of all, the steering is so quick, responsive. It just does exactly what you want it to do. The suspension stays nice and flat. For a vehicle that weighs 3,800 pounds, this thing handles and rides like a dream, but it also feels very capable. It feels like you could easily take this to a track. You can hang it with a 911, and that's kind of where Aston Martin worked hard to give this thing more of that sportier feel, and I appreciate it greatly. I mean, the seats are also incredibly comfortable and supportive. They hold you in place for aggressive driving. I can see out of the front, the sides, and the rear quite nicely. Actually, visibility is good aside from slightly fat A-pillars over here. This car does come with some driver assistance tech, like a full 360 camera, and I believe you also do have their form of adaptive cruise control, automatic emergency braking, all that stuff that you expect in terms of quietness when you're not listening to that sonorous exhaust noise. This thing's actually relatively quiet, so it's still a very competent GT car that doesn't beat you up on the daily commute. Now, in terms of efficiency, it's only rated at 1522. In my week's worth of testing, I was averaging 14 mpg, so not great miles to the gallon. This is not a hybrid or a mild hybrid. There's no EQ boost technology from Mercedes with this engine. On the highway, I was able to get around 21 mpg, so not bad. Sadly, the range for this vehicle, you're lucky to get like 200 miles on a full tank. If you guys drive this thing any aggressive manner, it's going to be guzzling gas. But hey, that's kind of what you get when you have a vehicle like this. You're going to be using more and more fuel. But overall, as a daily driver, this thing actually can handle its own quite nicely. And as a performance vehicle, as a sports car, I'm genuinely shocked at how good this car drives. Does it feel quite as good as the last 911 Turbo that I've driven? I would say it feels very different, but at the same time, it just feels very British. It feels like a muscle car, but it also feels much sportier than any Aston before it. And I'm just shocked. I think for a vehicle that, costs this much, Aston's done a great job at just kind of hiding the fact that this is an AMG engine while building in that kind of British character that you know and love about this brand. So after getting a chance to spend some time with essentially one of the most beautiful sports cars that money can buy, I have to say this has been an honor and a privilege for me to finally get behind the wheel of an Aston Martin sports car. Because as you guys know, I haven't had much experience with this brand. The last Aston Martin that I tested for the channel was a DBX 707, the updated version, which as you guys know, that is their SUV. And while it definitely has some British charm that you've come to expect from an Aston Martin, it's not quite the same as a luxury rear-wheel drive GT sports car that the brand essentially built their reputation on. So after spending some time with this vehicle here, the Vantage, I have to say for an entry-level model, I mean, as you expect, it's an Aston Martin, it feels anything but entry level. This is a car that basically gets attention everywhere you take it, especially if you get it in the right color like this podium green. It's part of their Racing Line series for an extra 10 grand. It is definitely worth the extra charge, although I'm not sure it's worth $10,000 extra, but it's a color that essentially has my recommendation. I personally would go with this with a brown interior. As you guys also saw from behind the wheel, this is actually a vehicle that functions as a driver's car. Even though Aston Martin is known for building some really comfortable luxury GT cars, this is something that again goes after your neighbor's Porsche 911 or a Mercedes AMG GT63S, which essentially has the same powertrain as this vehicle. 0 to 60 happens in the mid 3-second range, although if this vehicle had all-wheel drive and I had it during warmer temperatures, I suspect it would probably be closer to the low 3-second range. If they added all-wheel drive, this could easily be an under 3-second car. So that's one of the drawbacks about the Vantage. All of its competitors are all-wheel drive. Now, in terms of the ride quality and daily driving, this is something that you could daily drive as the ride quality is agreeable, although if you drive some of the competitive set, the Porsche 911 specifically is going to be a slightly more comfortable vehicle with also more interior space, more practicality. But for a vehicle like this, it actually did surprise me. The interior feels luxurious, it feels well crafted, it has high-end materials that you expect for a car that has a 6-figure plus price tag, and the infotainment software is a big improvement versus the old command system that you found in the old Vantage or the old Aston Martin brands in general. While it does still need some work, it is again a massive improvement, although again for me some of the best infotainment systems you're going to find are from the Porsche 911 and of course the newest Mercedes-Benz MBUX system. The trunk is also surprisingly usable. Fuel economy was agreeable considering what this vehicle is, and again, for a car company that really doesn't have the same kind of reach as something like a Porsche or a Mercedes, Aston Martin definitely is a well-known enough brand because everywhere I took this, people could tell that it was different, but once they saw it was an Aston, everybody's jaws just dropped. This is a car that, again, makes every other sports car appear invisible, as it should, because if you want something like this, it's going to cost you a pretty penny more versus a lot of its rivals, because even though this is the baby Aston, it still starts at just under $195,000. Now, of course, that is the base price. There are plenty of options to add. My particular test car here with essentially all the options that it has, and again, there are a few options that it could easily have, checks in at just over $264,000. That's right, there's about 70 grand worth of options on this car. And don't forget as well, Aston Martin is going to be offering a convertible version of this for an extra $10,000. Personally, I would definitely go with the topless version because when you have an engine that sounds this good, an exhaust that sounds this good, you're going to want to hear that emotional exhaust more. I am, of course, kind of wishing that Aston would offer this thing with a manual transmission again. There was a time when they did. But essentially what you're going to get here is one of the most comfortable and best handling and best looking sports cars that money can buy. And even though for the same money or less money, you could get a Porsche 911 or a Mercedes AMG GT63S or the SE Performance, there is something about the Aston Martin brand for people who have that kind of money that just evokes a sense of emotion and a sense of rarity that you're just not gonna find from a Porsche or a Mercedes. But with all that said, hope you guys have enjoyed my very detailed overview on one of again, the most beautiful cars that you can buy today on the 2025 Aston Martin Vantage. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.